So Elden Ring is a pretty huge game. First playthroughs can be anywhere from 50 to 250 hours. Despite this, speedrunning in the game can cut this down to less than an hour. But only until recently, speedrunning the game in co-op with friends was practically impossible. I mean, just look at this. When you summon someone for co-op, the game changes from an open, exploration-filled adventure to a running simulator. You don't even get access to your horse in co-op. Even worse, the servers are terrible, lag is constant, and you need special items to even be able to summon other players. While the developers made their world feel massive, in vanilla co-op that feeling is completely absent. But over half a year ago, a mod was released that overhauled everything. Elden Ring's seamless co-op. Gone are the archaic co-op mechanics that have been in the series since 2009. Completely open map, full torrent functionality, no need for consumable co-op items, a 6-player limit, and compatibility with tons of other mods. And the cherry on top, finally for the first time in FromSoft games, the opportunity to truly speedrun in co-op. And that is exactly what we did. Now, of course, not only is it a mod, but it's a multiplayer mod for a FromSoft game, and glitches are not a rare occurrence. Secret quicksand Easter egg, invisible torrent, completely functional boss AI, PlayStation 1 chest hair, critical NPCs going on holiday, pretty much every single interaction with Melina throughout the entire game. Godskin Duo, the best boss in the game, not accepting defeat and respawning after death. And last but not least, whatever the hell this is. Despite all that, this mod is still absolutely incredible, and it has single-handedly saved the co-op experience in Elden Ring. As far as rules go, the glitchy nature of the mod often forces us to leave and rejoin depending on the situation. The goal is to rejoin as soon as possible, but it's also more than viable to leave sometimes and join back at strategic points in the game. At the end of the day, it's not an official category, using an unofficial and hilariously broken mod, so rules don't really matter. For our characters, obviously we had to go with Pepe the Frog and Gigachad. As for starting classes, we both pick Samurai because why would you pick anything else? And the run begins. After loading in, we unequip some unimportant items and start heading through the tutorial. Knowing that 40 minutes of picking up items and running is coming up, both players feel like jumping off a cliff. Jokes aside, the mod also really dislikes it when players die before cutscenes, so the run becomes co-op at the iconic first step grace. After picking up stuff from Kale and a useful greatsword, we talk to this NPC that appears like 3 times throughout this 100-hour RPG and get our magical goat horse. After getting the Ash of War wet blade, we warp back to the first step and the run gets going. The beauty of seamless co-op is that both players can go do their own thing and gather items they need completely freely. Gigachad heads to the South Limgrave Everjail and grabs a useful Ash of War for later. Meanwhile, Pepe jumps off a cliff for real this time. Just kidding, the beach holds a useful item and one of the many merchants in the game. The goal next is to defeat Bloodhound Knight Daravil and get the first weapon of the run. Pepe never went to the south of Limgrave though, and they don't see the Grace next to the Everjail. No worry, leaving and rejoining happens for the first time in the run, and as Pepe reconnects, they acquire the Ash of War that was previously dropped. Quality of life functions like this make the mod a breeze to play, but also allow speedruns to have new tactics that wouldn't normally exist. The greatsword that was picked up earlier comes in handy here with its poise damage, although Dareville doesn't get stunned by the first Ash of War. At this point in the game, the health of bosses isn't very scaled up, so he goes down fairly fast. The weapon for Gigachad in the run is indeed the Bloodhound's Fang, but why? Because it's overpowered. And the weapon for Pepe is simply the Uchikatana, starter weapon for the Samurai. Again, because it's overpowered. The players split off again to grab Smithing Stones, the first Dectus Medallion, and the Wondrous Physique. The problem we faced very early in our planning of the route was the choice of weapons. Somber weapons are essentially just cheating because you can level them up much more easily than normal weapons. At the same time, it also made a lot of sense to use a weapon that could benefit from powerful Ashes of War such as the Uchikatana. Unfortunately, using two normal smithing stone weapons is practically impossible because of the number of upgrade materials needed. While Pepe picks up the recipe for sleep pots, Gigachad heads to Blythe's ruins to get the axe talisman. Pepe gets the physic flask and heads to the same ruins for crafting materials. On the way, the players meet up again in the middle of the Mistwood.
Dylan! You son of a bitch!
After this meeting of the least masculine Elden Ring players, Pepe goes to pick up the last items in Mistwood, but gets mauled to death by Winnie the Pooh. After respawning, the players head through Stormgate and towards Alexander while picking up some useful items along the way. Pepe picks up some more smithing stones, while Gigachad takes on this horseback knight who drops a reusable buff Ash of War, so we sneak up behind him and do him dirty. Alexander's story is one of my favorites in Elden Ring. It's that classic tale of an inexperienced warrior longing for glory, reverence, and knighthood. He goes through many hardships and setbacks, but he never gives up for the sake of his dream. There's something very human about him. He's emotional, foolhardy, but also unrelenting and ambitious beyond his means. His quest for greatness ultimately consumes him. To be remembered, you can either be a great hero or a great adversary. If he can't become a great warrior, at least he can die at the hands of one. It's tragic, beautiful, and bittersweet in the best way. Just kidding, we instantly kill him for a useful talisman. Right, moving on. Talismans are indeed one of the most important pieces of gear in the game, so Pepe picks up the turtle talisman here before splitting off again. During the run, both players pick up some of the same items and gear, but there are a few differences. While Gigachad rides confidently into Caelid, Pepe heads back towards Stormhill and ultimately Liurnia of the Lakes. While avoiding the house pets of Satan himself, Gigachad grabs some upgrade materials and buffs and heads towards the second Dectus Medallion. After acquiring it, they begin chipping away at the giant dragon sitting near the fort. Meanwhile, on the other side of the map, After running a cross-country marathon, Pepe leaves and rejoins to kill Grail the Dragon for a tasty bounty of runes. Then, both players head into Roundtable Hall to trade items, to upgrade their weapons, and to level up for the road ahead. Finally, the initial setup for the run is done. Following after the initial setup is a small boss rush. First in line is Margit the Fell Omen, major cause of refunds and negative Steam reviews.
Foul tarnished.
Our sense of humor is completely unrivaled, I know. Margit is normally a very tough first boss on any playthrough, but even the added health in co-op isn't enough to withstand early upgraded weapons. He does try to fight back, but Margit goes down in just a few attacks. The health of bosses starts ramping up quite a bit later, but in the early game, we enjoy being overpowered. Once he goes down, we get our second talisman pouch and begin running through Stormveil. While it is much safer to head through the side entrance to Stormveil, does it look like we care? Didn't think so. Our next target is Godric the Grafted, the first demigod boss. The run through the archers isn't very safe, but even with base vigor, we can tank a few hits if needed. Just before Godric, we grab some cracked pots for much later in the run. Just minutes after defeating Margit, we take on our next boss, if you can call this a boss. Compared to Margit, his attacks have much more range and power, but since he has to move 17 hands and 12 legs, it takes him a small eternity to get any attacks off. Godric's fate is similar to Margit because the damage we have in the early game just overwhelms. As I was saying, the damage overwhelms him and the scripted flamethrower move at the start of phase 2 ends the fight very quickly. With that, the first demigod of the run falls. Here we do another leave and rejoin, only this time it's different. While Pepe never even entered Caelid and still managed to join Gigachad in killing Grail the Dragon, Gigachad never entered Liurnia. While Pepe was busy doing that, they also picked up the Grace close to a teleporter to the Academy. Essentially what we do here is swap hosts. Both players retain the same progression, so after joining back in Liurnia, we can just move forward towards Rennala. We join forces once again and head into the Academy of Rey Lucaria to take on the ex-wife of a god and her dog. The teachers at the Academy are very aggressive, so we skip every class on our way to pet the dog. Unfortunately, this is not one of those games where you can pet the dog and it just straight up attacks us on sight. Red Wolf of Radagon is actually no joke. Highly damaging attacks, fast recovery times, and ranged spells make it one of the most agile bosses in the run. There's times in the fight where he will just jump around the arena for minutes at a time. The damage output still remains high at this stage though, and it doesn't take many hits to take him down. Next up is Rennala, Queen of the Full Moon, but before that Pepe has to grab an upgrade for the Uchi. Picking up the Ash of War in Limgrave allows them to apply the same powerful attack again, but now with the Glintstone Wetblade, making the weapon deal frost buildup on bosses. But in order to get the Wetblade, Pepe has to suffer this. Make no mistake though, getting shotgun in the face is actually faster. While Pepe spawns back on the Grace and equips the Ash of War, Gigachad opens up the shortcut near the elevator. To get to the elevator, we try to sneak past the enemy guarding it, simply because hostile NPCs in FromSoft games are literally insane. We're not good at stealth though, and Moongrum the Carrion Knight sees us anyway. Thankfully, he doesn't ride the whole way up with us, and we can move on.
Huh?
Pepe isn't even surprised, honestly. He just looks tired. Beating children isn't very difficult, so the first phase is a pushover. While the divorce did some stuff to Rennala's mind, it didn't do anything to her health pool, so the first phase lasts a while. Co-op also adds even more children, meaning more shields you need to break, so that takes even longer than normal. I'm sure that without context, this must look unbelievably violent, but funny enough, Rennala and her bundle of infinite offspring is only slightly weird in Elden Ring. After slapping her around a bit, the second phase starts and it becomes an actual fight. Rennala actually has a lot of tricky attacks. Her damage output is high, and dealing damage while avoiding all of the spells can be difficult. Although our weapons hit hard, we don't have Ashes of War like Wild Strikes that could fully stunlock her. We both get caught off guard by the summoning circle, which definitely loses us some time. Eventually, we run her down with 2 consecutive bleed bursts and a stylish finish. After a quick level up, leaving and rejoining happens once again. This time the destination is Altus Plateau. On the way to the elevator, we grab a flask upgrade and a rune arc, even if we're never getting any of the great runes. Very conveniently, only one player needs the medallions for the elevator, and so Pepe gets access to Altus basically for free. Please do ignore the levitation, it's completely normal. Entering Altus, the run actually starts to get difficult. Yeah, just kidding, the run actually gets difficult 5 minutes after entering Altus. We immediately go and take on the demi-human queen boss for another talisman, the ritual sword. The queen has a scripted 10-second downtime at the start of the fight, so she just stands there and dies. I tried my best to write something about this in the script, but I mean, yeah. The ritual sword is one of the better talismans for the run. Increasing damage while at full health is very nice, and we will be pairing it with the ritual shield later on in the run. The next boss in line is the Draconic Tree Sentinel, which blocks entry to Leyndell. The Sentinel is pretty terrifying and is one of the hardest fights in the run, in fact. He has a lot more health than anything so far, and has multiple attacks that can kill both of us in one hit. To get a bit more ready for him, we both grab not 1, not 2, but 5 golden seeds for more flask upgrades, and Pepe goes to grab a bell bearing for more smithing stones. After quickly visiting the round table, we're ready for battle, but even still, the fight is not easy at all. This is actually one of the few fights in the game where you can sneak behind them for a quick start without skills like Assassin's Gambit. While it's often worth it to go for heavy and slow moves in hopes of getting a stagger, basic attacks are also very important for status effect buildup. Sneaking behind him at the start allows us to chop 1/4 of his health in one combo. At this point, all of our runes were either spent on necessary levels for damage or weapon upgrades, so we have to play a bit more passively compared to other bosses. The second phase makes him even stronger, but after a ridiculous combo of Rot, Bleed, and Frost, we do around 6,000 damage in 5 seconds and end the fight quickly. When we enter the capital, we're close to the halfway point in the game. Only 2 bosses stand in the way of multiple new upgrades for our weapons, Godfrey's Golden Phantom and Morgoth the Omen King. Leyndell allows for some good splitting off tactics. While one player goes to get the shortcut elevator for later, the other goes ahead and runs forward to get graces further up in the city. Conveniently, the use of graces despawns enemies for a short time, so Pepe's journey through the ramparts is practically free. Once we've both arrived close to the Erdtree Sanctuary, we both go and get the Ritual Shield, the last talisman for the rest of the run. Godfrey's Phantom is the most straightforward fight in the run. He can't be afflicted with any status effects, so it's a pure fight of dodging and attacking. To call it simple would be exaggerating because he has quite a few mix-up in his combos and also often likes to switch targets mid-combo as well. This target switching is in fact the hardest thing about co-op runs in general, because when bosses decide to pull a 180 out of nowhere, it's extremely difficult to anticipate it. We're both pretty squishy at this point, but after the mass amount of runes that Leyndell gives us, we will be leveling Vigor quite a bit later on. After Godfrey goes down, Gigachad grabs a weapon upgrade and then the players head towards Morgoth. At this point you might be wondering why the game looks so different. FromSoft's cameras have never been that good for their games, but Elden Ring especially suffers from a low field of view that limits how much you can see of the game world. For this reason, we were both running an FOV unlocker mod, which can turn the game from this, to this, and also to this. It's an absolute travesty that the game is normally so zoomed in, but I highly recommend this simple mod for anyone playing on PC. It's also pretty illegal to use in real speedruns, so it's a good thing that this run is not one of those. Morgoth is one of the trickier bosses in the run, even if he doesn't have a lot of health. He has a couple scripted attacks that slow down the pace of the fight and give us some easy damage windows, but at the same time he's one of the fastest bosses in the game. It's also very easy for him to switch targets mid-combo, and overall the fight is always just incredibly RNG dependent. Thankfully he's also very weak to status effects, and we proc all 3 effects on him during the fight. He also provides us with the easiest RNG from all of our runs, doing multiple slow attacks that let us get some hits in. The health bar also glitched out during this run, which is always a bit confusing because you have no idea when the phase changes happen. Just like with the Tree Sentinel, the fight ends with an absolutely broken combination of Bleed, Frost, and Rot that completely melts him after a hilarious 17,000 damage combo. And as Morgoth goes down, we enter the endgame. Some random chick shows up again to give us the rolled medallion, and so begins the largest single stretch of traversal in the run. She tells us something new journey something while also staring at a wall for some reason. Before we embark on that journey, however, we have to establish some dominance over Morgoth. It's only fair, he spends half the game talking trash anyway. The journey through the mountaintops gives both players multiple upgrades, which prepare them for the pinnacle of the game's boss design, the Fire Giant. Pepe gets the most upgrades here since Gigachad already picked up Somber 8 and Somber 9 stones from Caelid. After running all the way to the foot of the Giant's Forge, we again visit the Round Table so Gigachad can bring the Bloodhound Fang to +9. Fire Giant is a massive jump in terms of health compared to anything that came before. What makes it much easier, however, is Pepe equipping Seppuku from the Frozen Lake Scarab. Even if this skill was nerfed, the increase in bleed buildup makes the fight much faster. In solo play, both of our weapons are actually capable of somewhat one-cycling Fire Giant in his first phase. However, in co-op, poise values are much higher. Despite this, we do manage a few staggers, but the added health at this point starts getting ridiculous, and the first phase still takes a while. What's also annoying is that Fire Giant resets his status effects when he transitions to the second phase. Which means that Scarlet Rot isn't very useful for this fight. Even if we were able to proc it in the first phase, it wouldn't matter for the second phase. After very bad Fire Pillar RNG, Gigachad desperately spams attacks while Pepe essentially carries the fight by bleeding Fire Giant multiple times. Depending on RNG, the fight is either a complete pushover or very prolonged, even with the effective bleed buildup. The fight this time around was definitely not as clean as some of our other runs, but Fire Giant has the possibility of being absolutely infuriating, so we can't really complain. Fire Giant is the second longest fight in the run, and after him only 5 remain in the final boss rush. Pepe leaves right after the fight for upgrades in the round table, while Gigachad makes his way to the top of the forge. That random chick shows up for the last time and then dies. She's definitely one of the characters of all time. At least she teleports us to Farum Azula, the final area in the game, and which houses yet another fantastic boss, the Godskin Duo. Gigachad makes it first to Azula, where they start running towards the Dragon Temple and our next roadblock. Running through Farum Azula is sometimes tricky, both in solo and co-op play. In solo, the enemies are fast enough to attack you even if you sprint past, and in co-op, aggroed enemies often block the person coming last. On the second side of Grace, Pepe picks up some of the smithing stones left there by Gigachad. This makes purchasing the last ones a bit cheaper after Godskin Duo. We do this kind of trading a few times throughout the run to get as many levels into damage statistics as possible. The lilies and pots Pepe picked up more than an hour ago finally become useful, and we enter the fight with sleep pots in hand. The input reading on the pot throws is still kind of annoying, but thankfully they have big splash areas so we sleep both of them pretty easily. We apply all of our buffs and start wailing away at one of the Godskins. In solo, you can melt both of them before they even stand up, but here they have a bit too much health. Indeed, Skinny goes down without a fight, but Fatty is just way too thick and gets a few attacks off before dying as well. You might have thought that the respawning Godskin Duo in the bug montage at the beginning was some kind of joke, but no, that can absolutely happen with this mod. Thankfully not this time, however. While we don't get a second fight altogether, Skinny does respawn after the first wave, but thankfully we have enough pots to just constantly reapply sleep. After taking out Skinny once again, a double respawn happens as well, but an excellent throw by Pepe sleeps them both at the same time. At this point they're very low on health and the fight becomes trivial. We finish off the duo and Pepe obtains their last upgrade items with the bell bearing. Gigachad's last upgrade stone is behind the most hazardous area in the game, but at this point we have leveled enough vigor to just sprint right through all of it with no regard for our safety. While Gigachad picks up the last upgrade stone, Pepe runs forward to get the Grace right before Maliketh the Black Blade. A quick final visit to the round table gets us ready for the fight. Maliketh is my personal favorite fight in the game. Unfortunately for me, he doesn't have a lot of health, but fortunately for the run, he doesn't have a lot of health. One of the most aggressive bosses in the game, the first phase is tricky because of many AoEs and fast projectile attacks. I'd actually say that the first phase of Maliketh is actually one of the toughest bosses in the game. If he had any more poison health, that is. Staying close to the clergyman often baits him into doing a slow overhead slam that gives us ample time to get some hits in. We actually get pretty bad RNG for the first phase, but still chop through him pretty easily, but disaster strikes at the start of the second phase. We begin the phase almost perfectly. Dodging the scripted swipe is easy enough, and we get a perfect stagger. We exploit this downtime the best we can, and get a massive combo, but Gigachad misses the critical hit, and Maliketh whips out Destined Death and one-shots Pepe. If this was vanilla co-op, the fight would just end if the host died, but now it's up to the remaining player to finish the fight while the other gets to spectate. Maliketh tries his best with some of the largest AoE attacks he has. He also pulls out an absolutely ridiculous combo of multiple leaping slams in a row, but Gigachad avoids all of it with care, even if his pants are turning brown. The Bloodhound Fang is definitely not the best weapon to fight him with, partly because I'm really bad with it, but eventually we clutch the fight, and the run is alive. Getting there definitely wasn't easy, but as we enter the capital of Ash, only 3 bosses remain. After a quick level up, Pepe once again rejoins to take on the first one, Sir Gideon off near the All-Knowing. Just kidding, when I said take on Gideon, I meant to absolutely stomp him through the floor. His fight is tricky in solo play, but in co-op he doesn't stand a chance. NPC bosses in Souls games are never very fun, so I'm not complaining.
A man cannot kill a god.
Clearly Gideon didn't realize that this is a Japanese video game. Godfrey's next, and the amount of testosterone dripping through the screen is reaching dangerous levels.
Long and hard.
Godfrey's first phase is almost exactly the same as his Phantom version from earlier. We both make some mistakes in the fight. While co-op obviously makes the game easier, sometimes it's very tricky avoiding bosses' attacks because you can dodge into the wrong direction and leave the attacks to your friend. Even worse, Godfrey has a lot of forward momentum, which is actually pretty tricky to chase down sometimes. As the first phase goes on, after a while he starts doing arena-wide explosions, which make healing very difficult if we end up getting hit. Of course it's optimal to stay at full health to get both talismans working, but we manage without them as well. We only have to endure Godfrey's buffed form for a little while because of a frostbite proc and a stagger to end the first phase. Horalu is insanely aggressive, but thankfully he gives us lengthy attack windows during his grabs. A lot of his moves are also unpunishable. The swipe combos are too fast and the AoEs are too large. He also does a full 360-degree grab and almost catches Pepe. We get pretty good RNG and he starts buffing without wasting too much time. The buff again allows us a lot of free attacks and we get a clutch stagger to end the fight very fast. After Pepe flexes on Godfrey for style points, only one boss remains between us and the throne of Elden Lord. But the throne only has room for one of us. We join forces for the last time and enter the Erdtree. Radagon and Elden Beast both are tough fights, Radagon especially. He changes targets mid-combo, he spams explosions, teleports, and delayed hammer swings. The second longest fight in the run, he remains absolutely relentless from start to finish. Staggering him is relatively easy with both of our weapons, but depending on RNG and his aggression, it can be very difficult. Our weapon's bleed buildup is rendered completely useless at the end here, although Frostbite gives us some larger damage chunks. The beauty and fun of a run like this was the design stage. Figuring out which weapons would be fast to acquire and upgrade was very fun, and we ended up with some obvious choices. I imagine a similar run with both Somberstone weapons or even sorceries would be very powerful and accrue very different results in a lot of the fights. This last fight, however, is always a huge endurance challenge, no matter the build choice. Even with our consistent damage, Radagon never lets up and slowly but surely grinds down our flasks. And when he finally falls, both players are low on resources. The fight with the Elden Beast will be the longest fight in the run. In solo play, it would be very simple to stagger Elden Beast right at the start and burst him down to less than 50% before the fight even starts. In co-op, however, he swims away way too easily and slows down the fight a lot. Thankfully, we don't get the worst possible RNG imaginable. We do manage to get a stagger, but unfortunately the game teleports Pepe to the riposte, and we miss out on some damage while the beast was staggered. While summoning the first divine punishment, something absolutely beautiful and rare happens. A glitch that I've never seen in over a year of gameplay spawns the explosion in the sky. We don't have a lot of time to admire it, however, before the attacks continue. Quite infamously, he also has the ability to spam projectiles from range, but this time around we're luckier than normal and he mostly goes for melee combos. He even teases running away, but immediately swings back once again. By some miracle, we actually managed to skip the fan-favorite attack, Elden Stars, with another stagger. This time we hit a massive combo and whittle him down slowly. As his health starts to come down, only one real threat remains, and that is the triple divine punishment. And like it was nothing, we avoid all of it easily, ready for the final push. 2 hours and 27 seconds later, we've arrived at the end. Avoiding all of his attacks, we land the killing blow and slay a god. The run is finished. But the throne only has room for one. This video was over half a year in the making. Often very tedious, editing took a long time, but I enjoyed the process nonetheless. Elden Ring continues to be one of my favorite games of all time, and with this mod, I believe it's the best co-op experience I've ever played. Please stay tuned for more Elden Ring in the future. I cannot state how excited I am for the upcoming DLC. But for now, thank you for watching.